Hello and welcome back to the RevOps Show. If you're watching the video recording today, you're going to notice that something looks a little bit different. That's correct, everybody. We got a brand new set. If you'd like to see it, hop on over to our page where you can view the actual video and see what I'm talking about. Otherwise, today's focus is around CRM adoption, why it's so hard, missteps teams make in getting adoption, things you can do to help drive adoption, and much, much more. It's an extremely high energy episode today, so be prepared for lots of laughs and lots of learning. And with that, let's get started.
Jess, we made it back into the studio.
We did. You're doing your happy dance.
I don't know what's going on. I'm getting confused. Do you feel boxed in, strung out,
a little bit,
threatened?
Wow.
You're running through a forest, Jess.
Oh, is that what this is? I'm running
Close your
through
eyes.
a forest.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never close your eyes when you're running through a forest.
I see. It's a good tip.
Hey, Jess. Neutron
Doug.
walks into a bar, asks the bartender how much for a shot of tequila. Bartender says, for you, no charge. Bam! There we go.
Starting off with a good dad joke.
Oh, goodness gracious. You can't go anywhere without a dad joke.
Can't take you anywhere and not have a dad joke.
Oh, well, I am a dad.
You are. So all jokes from you are dad jokes.
And I am a joke.
No comment.
Wow. Thanks for protecting my self-image, Jess. Aren't you supposed to help make me feel good about myself? Isn't that one of your roles?
That is one of my roles. One of my roles is also to kind of bring you back down to earth. So it's a delicate balancing act, but I think I do it well.
Down to earth. Wow. All right, Jess. What are we talking about today?
I want to talk about CRM adoption.
So, as opposed to adopting kids.
Yes, I don't want to talk about adopting kids. I want to talk about CRM adoption. You know, the salespeople are sometimes like kids. So,
yeah, they're like 6-year-old kids.
Yes.
If you're lucky.
Yes.
And hey, any salespeople out there that are getting offended, I'm a salesperson. I include myself in that. Sorry, that
it was bothering you.
It was distracting me. It was getting in the way of my my ability to focus on the questions that you have about adoption. Where do you want to start?
Yeah. So I want to talk about the difficulties around adoption. What's the right way to drive adoption? And you know whether or not you use that as a measure in an implementation. So first,
hi, Jess's mom.
Hi, Mom. You're just not going to let me ask the first question. You're just going to keep digging in. So let's start with, why is adoption so hard? Like, this is a pain point, I think, for nearly everyone that we talk to when we talk about CRM implementation. What is so hard about adoption?
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
It might be a little bit dangerous to ask.
Oh boy.
Live here. After we implement, is adoption an issue?
Can be.
Do we have clients that struggle with adoption?
I think where adoption is the issue is the unrealistic expectations of adoption and not really defining what you mean by adoption. So, you know, it takes months to get everybody used to using the CRM, like just using it from day to day. It can take months. You don't walk in day one and you're automatically using everything the way that you need to be using it. So is it an issue long term? No, I don't think it's an issue. I think that where we talk about adoption issues when we implement, it's more, I have unrealistic expectations. I'm expecting adoption at day one.
What are some of those unrealistic expectations?
So everyone's going to log into the CRM and do exactly what we want them to do, the way we want them to do it from go. I think that is frequently an expectation, particularly on the ops side of the house when we implement a CRM. And that's not how it works.
Well, and outside of the fact that like I wouldn't call that an unrealistic expectation. I'm not saying it's not an unrealistic expectation. I would actually call that a bad expectation.
Okay,
I would call that a bad idea. But
I agree.
outside of that, because the great thing about the Western world is it's totally legal to have bad ideas and move forward on them. Is that issue isn't it's not that's not a CRM issue. That's not a CRM adoption issue. That's a business process adoption issue.
Why do you say that?
Well, because people aren't doing what we want them to do the way we want them to do it. That's process.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I agree.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a what we believe in here at Imagine is good process, especially process that involves humans. And I would say especially process that where variance is a feature and not a bug, right? So that's another element, right? Too often process is rote. It's rinse and repeat, and when you take that type of mindset to process, it doesn't stand up to the real world because it treats variance as a bug, not a feature, right? I'll go back to one of my favorite quotes of Jack Welch, who was the biggest Six Sigma fan in the world, when he was asked would Six Sigma work in every business discipline? And he said all that he can think of except two. And he said sales and trial law were the two places. And the reason was Six Sigma, the goal of Six Sigma, the job of Six Sigma is to eliminate variance, eliminate all variance. All variance is bad. So Six Sigma doesn't delineate between good variance and bad variance. So in a Six Sigma world, right? So if I'm manufacturing jet engines, all variance is bad.
Yep.
But in a sales interaction where things are constantly changing, that's part of what's there. And the reason that we have salespeople is theoretically to be able to make the adjustment, right? To be able to read to what's being said and what's not being said and all those different things, variance, so if you set up process where variance is bad, you're either not going to have an effective sales team or you're not going to have process adoption. So I think, number one is when you talk about adoption is what adoption problem are we having? To finish the thought that I started earlier is, what we believe is that there are key inflection points, right? When I coached college baseball, and worked with hitters, I talked a lot about the swing path, right? So a swing is highly variant, right? If I teach everyone to have to swing exactly the same every time, we've lost, because like if the pitcher knows exactly what we're going to do, like if my swing's not designed to adjust to my biomechanics, my style, what's being thrown, what am I trying to do, then you're not going to be successful over time. So identify what are those key milestones, what are those key waypoints, and be really focused on that, and then be really flexible in the style, be flexible in the how, right? And so if you make me go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and I'm in sales, that's just not going to hold up, right? And so when you have rigid process like that, it doesn't stand the test, and so you just break or ignore the process, and then that manifests itself as adoption, as an adoption problem, kind of sort of theoretically, because again, it goes back to, like, if we're gonna say adoption is whatever, you need to define it. What is adoption? And I think when you talk about adoption, and when people talk about adoption, they don't define what adoption is.
So that's a good point. So how do you define what adoption is? Like what would be an example of that?
I mean, it's so amazingly situational that it's hard to answer the question. I would identify that there's, core activities, core, like here's an example. I do not log every call in the CRM.
No, you don't.
I don't.
You're not following our protocol. I'm joking. That was a joke.
But am I not following our protocol?
No.
So wait, no, I'm not, or
No,
no?
You are following our protocol. There is no protocol that says you must log every call.
Bingo. We don't have a protocol.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And what the protocol is we want access to the data. So by the way, we've got a VoIP system that transcribes, doesn't always record, but transcribes. Right. So
Yep.
so A, we have access to that, so that if we needed it for something, right. B, when it is a call of importance, then we do want that in the system. So like today, I made sure to make the call from the CRM so that it could be recorded, so that it could be transcribed in the CRM, right? But the fact that like all these other calls that I'm making, do I really need to know that I made that call?
Probably
I don't. Now, there might be situations where someone does need to know. Now, what I would ask is, okay, great. How are you using that information? Okay. Now, I would say, and as a great example of logging a call, part of the problem we have, so we have made the decision that the cost associated for the solutions to enable inbound calling the juice isn't worth the squeeze for us.
Right.
So one difficulty is if I call you from the CRM and leave you a message and you call me back, I can't answer that call in the CRM to have the same functionality. Right. So if that matters, I have to like not answer the call and then call them. Right. And so it's just not like, what are we going to do with the data? Nothing. Okay, great. Then,
right.
So like, I would say that's an over-engineered process. So like, that's not, so the fact that I don't do that doesn't mean that I'm not adopting. Right. And so, so I mean, am I like,
yeah, that answered it. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I might be opening a can of worms with this question, because adoption is frequently used as a success measure for implementation of a CRM. Is that the right approach? Is that a good measure of, was the CRM implementation successful?
I think it's more a measure of, is it failing than is it successful?
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. And it's, I can't remember if it's ever been communicated that way to me. When people talk about measuring adoption, it's always a measure of success, not an indicator of it failing.
Well, so I don't know if this is what prompted the topic for today, but you remember I created the 20 ways to get CRM adoption. I created my list of 20 items for CRM adoption because we're working with a potential client that has a major adoption issue with their existing CRM. And it was all about adoption. So we demonstrate and you know what? And like I predicted it. It happened precisely the way I thought it was going to happen. We won them over on the point about adoption. And you know what the CEO asked like almost instantaneously?
What?
How do we know if we get adoption with the CRM that it's going to increase sales?
There you go.
Right. So like the measurement, like the entire conversation up to that point was
adoption.
Success is adoption. Right. But then it became very quickly, no, that wasn't success. Success is, are we generating more sales? Right. And so, no one that I'm aware of is seeking to win the adoption award.
Well, I might be. No, I'm kidding.
Well, the problem is you tell your RevOps team, this is the RevOps show, right?
This is the RevOps show.
Am I on the right show? You tell your
Welcome.
RevOps team that adoption is what matters. It needs to be adopted. And so what you just told the RevOps team is you need to win the adoption award.
Yeah.
Right. And so no wonder why they behave the way they behave. That was a bad communication. right? And how do we get adoption? We actually add more and more. So
Right.
like to me, adoption isn't hard. You said, why is adoption hard?
Hmm.
I can't help but think when I hear that, that's the wrong question,
Okay, so
right?
what is the right
It's
question?
it's so well, two things, because I don't like, it's not hard, but it's not easy,
Okay.
right? Adoption is a byproduct, right? Adoption is a byproduct of good process and good implementation, right? When
I
adoption
agree with
is the
that. Yep.
objective, you're looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and by the way, you're less likely to drive adoption. Like, how do we drive adoption? First thing, stop talking about adoption. Don't drive adoption, right? The goal isn't use of the CRM, because the other thing that happens when you don't define adoption clearly is you define adoption of full use of.
Right.
So that means every time I don't use it to send an email or to log a call or to do this or whatever, then I'm not adopting. And by the way, when that's the measurement, I can never win the adoption game. Right. So that's one other problem is the way people play the adoption game, you can never win, because in that, everything is being done the way that it allows for there's no slack, and that's not realistic, as you said, et cetera. Right. So if the tool isn't being used, so let's say Doug isn't logging calls.
Which we've learned he's not.
I'm not logging all calls. Okay. So actually, I'm going to change the story for a second. Remind me to come back to Doug is not logging calls.
Okay.
So back when I worked for a company where I had an expense account, which meant they would reimburse me.
Right.
Right. I was notorious for filling out my expense reports like insanely late. And I got a call from my VP's boss. And they said, Doug, from now on, if you don't get an expense report in within 30 days, just don't even send it, because we're not going to reimburse you. And I said to him, seriously? I said, well, so first off, if I send you an expense report, and like sometimes I was 4, 5, 6 months late, right? Shame on me, right? Like,
right.
I'm like, if I send it to you 4 months from now, how does that hurt you? Well, we need to account for. I'm like, wait, seriously, really? Like, again, doesn't hurt you. And by the way, like,
right.
Explain to me how it doesn't help you, because basically what I'm doing is I'm giving you a no interest loan.
Right. Right.
And I said, okay, well, let me ask you this. So if it comes down to, do you want me on a day-to-day basis thinking about how do I move opportunities forward, or where am I going to clear out time to complete my expense reports? Because if you want me to switch my priorities, I'll do it. Right. That was the end of that issue. Right.
Right.
Okay. So same thing. So Doug's not logging his calls.
Yep.
Okay. And let's say that for whatever reason, in this case, logging calls is an important piece. Well, what most people do is they go, what's wrong with Doug? We need to get.
Well, that's what people say anyway.
Okay. This is the proverbial Doug. This is not actually me. But that's a fair point. That is a fair point. Right. Well, what I say is, why isn't he logging calls?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something, is there something, is it a system issue? Is it like, let's find out. Right. Because that, and that's why I say it's a sign. It's a sign of failure. It's not a sign of, it's not a sign of success. Now, if I were to dig in, I'd find that I'm on the road a lot, and so I'm calling from my cell phone, right? And again, there could be any number of things, and now the question comes: does it matter?
Right.
Right. Which
what's
also
the
comes
impact?
to, like, never ask a user of any system to do something if doing it doesn't impact something, right? And then so the next step is, if it does matter, okay, how do we make it easier to do it the way we want you to do it? How do we make it harder to not do it the way we want you to do it.
Yeah.
Right. And does that path bring us closer to our objective, or does it take us further away? Right. There's no such thing as a perfect implementation.
There's not.
Right. And again, I think it was on our last episode or some episode or somewhere, maybe it was in my sleep, where I talked about trade-offs.
Yeah.
Again, it all comes down to trade-offs, right? If this, you get this benefit, you have this cost. That's what life is. And so, what we want to do is we want to focus on what matters. And by the way, here's how I could solve the problem if it mattered. I could have a phone system that would integrate with my CRM so that when Doug made calls on the phone system, because that's where he makes calls from for whatever reason,
Yep.
they're automatically pushed into
The CRM.
the CRM, right? And now I get adoption without having to do anything. Like, why has everyone built these plugins for email tools so that I can, because I don't care who you are, I don't care what it is, with some exceptions, it is easier to manage my email from an email tool than it is from a CRM.
Well, yeah, we're all more comfortable at it. Everybody's been using that forever.
Right. And
Yeah.
in some with some exceptions, again, and so now when I use my, it doesn't matter what email I use, it's in the CRM. Right. So adoption is not an issue. So how do you make adoption easier? You realize that it's not the objective, it's the byproduct. And so when you're not getting adoption, you've got to ask yourself, is it a process problem? A gap, an ambiguity, a conflict in the process? And there's all kinds of conflicts in process. Is it an implementation problem?
How would it be an implementation problem?
Logging calls is too difficult. We need to make it easier to log a call.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay.
Then the third level is a people problem, right? The third level is, okay, now you're going out of your way not to.
Yeah.
Right. But if we've looked at it and we said it matters, right? Then, by the way, if it matters, the juice should be worth the squeeze.
We fit it in.
So for me to do it,
Mm-hmm.
how does that help me?
So I was actually gonna ask you this. So because you're known as having said so what from time to time. Is that something that needs to get clearly communicated to the users so they understand why? Like, so for instance, the importance of logging calls because we're going to use the information for X, like that needs to be communicated to the users, right? What's in it for them? So what? Why are you asking me to do this?
Yeah, and I would say logging calls is often a hard one to do, but let's say we need you to update this so that the lead status or the life cycle updates. Because if the life cycle is not right, then the emails that marketing sends to it are not going to be right. And then you're going to complain that, or if you haven't identified what the, what we call it a high probability indicator, if you haven't identified the high probability indicator, then, then that doesn't trigger you to the right cohort of emails and options. And when you have it right, not only do you now know that marketing is not going to send anything out that's in conflict? And by the way, the reason marketing needs to send out is, and you show what the impact of content is. And by the way, not just what is the impact of content, but what's the consequence of not having content going out while a salesperson, right? Because most salespeople, and I think with justification, are like, hey, if it's on my plate, I just assume no one touches anything. Because that way, if I win, I win because of me. And if I lose because of me, not because someone did something that theoretically they shouldn't have done.
Right.
Well, that's not enough to stand up in today's world.
Sure.
So you want to make those adjustments. And now I'm showing you how this helps, how this happens. And if you keep this profile up to date, then you'll get proactive nudges.
Yeah.
Right. How do I get people to log into the system? I have tasks automatically created so that I have to go to my task queue to know what's going on. And I have things that are managing so that when I'm not doing those things, I can go, hey guys, what's up? Right. It's underlying business process.
And then, so you talked about the variance and being able to build in some flexibility into the CRM. So I think you hit on some of that with talking about having an integrated calling system. Are there things you could do in the CRM as a user to make it more intuitive, or make that flexibility there, so as a rep, when I come across something, I'm able to bob and weave and shift? Like, what are the things that kind of you can put in place from an implementation standpoint that would drive that?
Give me a little bit more context. I'm not completely clear what you're asking. It feels like you're
So,
asking two very different questions.
okay, I might have got halfway in and then went another way. So, we talked about the challenge of having it super structured makes it harder to use, because I have to do this, I have to do that, and then I have to do that. And that might not necessarily be my process. So how do you build flexibility into the system to allow me to account for variance?
So here again, flexibility is its flexibility in the process, and that comes down to in its simplest way, because Jess, at the end of the day, it's all about just mapping properties. What matters, like too often we're trying to get the CRM, like take the playbooks feature in HubSpot or in a number of other tools,
Mm-hmm.
right? We build out the call structure, right? You ask this, here's you using that. And by the way, when I first saw it, I thought, wow, this is freaking great. I've been looking at this forever. Then I started having reps do it, and I listened to them, and their calls sucked. And I'm like, man, they're just not doing it right. So I started using it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I listened to my calls, and my calls sucked. I sounded like a robot, or I sounded like completely disorganized.
Right.
Because I couldn't follow the path of the conversation. Either because the tool was telling me go this,
Right.
or I was spending so much time to find where to put it that I realized, for the type, as an example for me, for the types of conversations I was having, what I needed was a way to download the relevant information easily.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so it wasn't about logging it during the call. It was about a quick, easy debrief and prompts after. And by the way, what I also did is, between, there are very few calls that I make that matter, that aren't recorded. And as part of the recording, they're transcribed. And
Right.
So, by the way, any of the general information, well, we need them to log that, because, at some point down the road, we might need to know what was said, Okay, great. Well, let's just have a transcript of it.
Yeah.
Right now. Okay. So now all that general stuff, one thing I would say is, if we're talking about like text fields, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm just coming up with this. So so challenge me on this if you think so. It's something I'm going to think about, and I might update my take in a future RevOps show. But I'm going to say text fields primarily are for the rep. Non-text fields are for the organization or the rep.
I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so from a like CRM adoption standpoint, first thing I'm going to say is minimize text fields.
Yeah.
Right. Someone says, well, we need to know the information because we might need to search on it. Well, guess what? If it's a text field, you're not going to get any valuable data from a, right. So, make it like, why was someone not interested? We need to know why people weren't interested. Okay. Make it a drop-down field.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we can't narrow it down. Okay. Well, then, start off with some assumptions, have another, like there's a whole bunch of different ways.
Yeah.
Go ahead and make it a text field. But remember, most people, if the rep doesn't find value in it, they're not going to do it because it's hard. Now, the other thing, and we see this all the time, a lot of times, like there's multiple things that you need to know. Like we have situations where when a rep updates one property, depending upon other things that, that are, depending upon what else is there, 7 properties might get updated automatically
Yeah.
based on that. But the rep just needs to update that one property, which is very relevant to them. And now, instead of having to update 7 things like that, so those are places where you streamline it, and you do that by, you map the process. Again, the technology, the CRM is only effective if it's enabling the process. And so if it's not being used, right? And so, like, here's another example. If you have an issue where 7% of your team isn't using something, maybe it's an adoption problem, it's a people problem, they're not cooperating.
Right.
If it's 20, 30, 50, 80%, you don't have an adoption problem, you have a process problem, right? When it's an adoption problem, you've got lots of one-offs not cooperating.
Yeah.
The sales team isn't logging calls. I can tell you one reason why a sales team doesn't log calls, because the manager never uses the CRM. Asks me, so what happened on that call? And I'm like, I logged in and I put in the notes. Okay, yeah, but great. Tell me what happened. Okay, I guess I'm not going to log and put in the notes anymore. Whereas if the manager sees, okay, and I come in, hey, Jess, I noticed X. Can you tell me a little bit more about this?
Right.
Hey, X. Hey, Jess, I noticed that you had the call. I didn't see what the status of that, right? Or like, so like we create a deal essentials. Now there we do use text properties because it is for the rep, but it's a little bit like spinach, right? Like, so one of our properties is what are the obstacles or barriers?
Yeah.
And that's a text field, right? Because we want the rep to articulate what the obstacle or barriers are. Because we know that if a rep articulates it, they're automatically going to be strategizing for how to deal with it.
Right.
And we'll have the information to be able to do a review. Right. And so I go in and I see, hey, awesome, Jess. When is this closing? Because I see there are no barriers. Because here's what I know. If there are no barriers to a sale, if there are no reasons that someone won't buy, then the only thing left for them to do is to buy. So if there's no barrier in there, then
right,
they should buy. Right. And so, but again, if I just call them and go, so what barriers are you facing, Jess? And you're like, well, it's in the CRM. Then I'm not, one of the things that I like, most good CRMs do this now. We're big HubSpot fans, obviously. I talk to people, stop sending emails to your reps. Notify them in the account record. And by the way, you send an email to a rep. What just encouraged me to do is look in my emails to try to remember what's going on with it.
Right.
If you notify me through the CRM, so I have to go into the CRM to respond, then I'm in the CRM.
Yeah, I think it's a point that actually gets missed a lot in adoption is having the managers use the CRM in the way that you're talking about. Because I think frequently you'll see where the managers will go in and they're almost like the compliance police. They're going in to see if things have been filled in, and that's what they hit you up on. Like, why hasn't this been filled in? But they don't talk to you about the things that you have in there. They don't.
And you know why?
Why?
Because they don't have a clearly mapped business process.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there's no juice for the rep to keep the CRM up to date, other than they're not going to get yelled at.
Right.
And reps get yelled at all the time anyways.
Right. I'll also make the argument. I mean, I agree with you on the business process point. I also will make the argument that the managers, I don't think, get trained to use the CRM that way. Like, we do training for users to say, or frequently you do training for users to say, okay, this is how you log your calls, this is how you send your emails, this is how you do your ticket pipeline for service. But
Bingo.
I think it gets
you
missed.
Just hit the problem.
What?
And you know this, we talk about it all the time. Never, you want adoption? Never, ever, ever call it a CRM initiative. Never, ever call it a tech initiative. Right? This isn't how you log your tickets.
This is how you do.
This is how you manage
process.
a service response.
Yeah.
This is how you manage a service request.
Yep.
This isn't how you log your calls. This is how you manage an opportunity.
Correct. And so those user stories are important, but I think the other piece that gets missed is those user stories. Like, I think people are training more, from what I've heard and seen, on the user stories, but they're not training the managers on a day in the life in the manager. You're just training the users, and the manager doesn't realize, oh, if I'm doing a review of my reps activities I should go in, I should at them. Like that needs to be part of how you onboard.
Hold on a second. So the customer acquisition process is not the sales management process.
No, it's not.
So again, it goes back to, if you don't have a clear sales management process, then managers are oversight, right? They're not really
Yeah.
managers, and they're certainly not coaches,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What a good CRM implementation should enable managers to be is to be better coaches,
100%.
right?
100%.
And again, the way I approach it is, I go into the CRM. So I have my deal essentials, right? My deal essentials gives me the snapshot that I need to know what's going on in the account. So I don't start off my review with them saying, so tell me what's going on in this account. I might say, I don't understand the plot here. I don't understand the problem. Well, no, that's not a problem, right? But now here's my secret, right? We've built it and designed it so that it's kind of like, for me, it's kind of like the doctor comes into your room. They don't even know who's behind the door when they get to the door. But the way that clipboard is set up is it tells them who you are, why you're there, what's happened.
Yep.
So when they come, they go, oh, so how have you been? Right. And so I have so the way it's set up, I don't have to do a deep review before I get on. Right. I've got a view set up the right way. And if there's something that's more complex, I make sure that I have prep time. Right.
Sure.
And I come in and so we start off at least 0.2 because of what's in there. Right. And if it's not in there, then I assume it's not there. And I don't go, why aren't you keeping it up to date? I might go, oh, well, if that had been in there, if I had known that, we would have like this.
Yeah.
Right. But you begin. And by the way, what people now know is, hey, I better be ready. The information better be in there. Because what they also see is when the information is in there, it more often than not, it's like, it's a confirmation element. It's easier, it's faster, there's more juice for them. So again, it gets into like, what's the job here? And, far too often, going back to the proverbial logging calls, it doesn't make a shit bits of difference one way or the other.
I agree. Yep. So kind of last thing I want to hit it. So we talked about what to do like through implementation to kind of drive some of these things, and we talked a little bit about training, but is there anything you would do post launch? Like what could you do after you've launched to help?
I think it's more I think it's more, what do you not do after launch? The number one cause that I see with that leads to poor adoption is you try to do too much. Right? This is change management. You're not changing the technology, you're changing the behavior.
Yeah.
I see people over automate, right?
Oh,
And so automation goes awry. By the way, automation going awry will just kill adoption. If for no other reason, it's like we've just launched a brand new process that's actually impacting a number of things that we have in place. And so we're going through a process of cleaning up automations that are being triggered that we didn't know about. And I can tell you, I added one today and I'm like, I'm on my mouse clicking save and I'm like, okay, what's going to happen that I don't expect? Right now, because we know, like, again, this is a sign of good process because we know, and we proactively made the decision that it would be easier, faster, and less disruptive to diagnose this through, as it's executing in its early stage, and everyone's expectations have been managed and all that. Right. So, before we do the next thing, right, we're going to get this locked down. And that's where we refer to as the 3 zones of execution. Everything shouldn't be now. As a matter of fact, here's the best thing that you can do if you want better process adoption and better CRM adoption. You should launch your CRM 3 to 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Right. You should have 3 to 4 launches. And understand, this launch adoption is going to be spotty. The second launch is reinforcing the adoption of the first, and you're introducing the second. We introduced, running plays, and I was like, oh yeah, I get it. Yeah, we're gonna do it. Great. No one does anything for 30 days.
Yeah.
Right. We have it built in. There's the 30-day check-in, right? And we have to teach people, look, no one's going to do anything, right?
Yeah.
Let them not do anything. We know what's going to happen, right? Then we come back and it's like, okay, guys, what happened? Everyone was excited. Everyone was right.
Yeah.
Well, because, really the first 30 days for them, that was the familiarization. And it's like,
yep.
Right. And so again, you have to manage it through that lens of understanding that it's change management, understanding that everyone's got a day job.
Say on the comment of doing too much, I think something I've learned this year with all the implementations that we've done is a very powerful term when you're talking about initial launch is phase 2. Like being very clear about what do we need for launch? Is this going to be too much for launch?
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to go to phase 2. That's going to be the next iteration of the CRM, because I think everybody has this inclination to put everything at launch. They want, it got put to me yesterday as like they want the Lexus with the bow on it at Christmas time. They want it perfect and they want everything, right? They want the full package, the full kit and caboodle. And when you're doing a new process and a new CRM, you can't have everything at launch.
And here's another element, right? It's never going to be the Lexus with the bow on top because it's not a product. It's an ecosystem. It's a
right.
changing environment. If everything were clean algorithmic, then we wouldn't need people to do it.
Right.
Right. So again, it's back to, is the variance a feature or a bug? Are the humans a feature or a bug? Right. Far too often, CRMs are built for bots, not for humans.
Yeah.
Build bot better. Don't build for bots. Unless a bot's executing. If a bot's executing, then build for a bot. If a bot's not executing, build for a human.
Yeah. I actually like that. I think we end on that. Don't build for a bot.
Unless bots are executing.
All right, cool. So yeah, that was everything I wanted to cover. I like the don't build for a bot takeaway. I also think like the big thing that gets lost when you talk about CRM implementation is that adoption should not be your objective. It should be the byproduct of what you're doing.
And I do want to, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't measure it. You should, but if you're going to measure it, before you start measuring it, you need to define what is it.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap on this episode of the RevOps Show. One of my favorite lines throughout the entire episode was that adoption is a byproduct of good process and good implementation. If you enjoy this episode, please make sure to go subscribe on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, and share the episode. If you have any questions you'd like to ask Doug or Jess around CRM adoption, or would like to give us your feedback on the brand new set, email me at hannah@imaginellc.com or hit us up on Twitter @demandcreator. Until next time, remember, you can't solve your upstream problems downstream.